Hi everyone, I'm here with Emma Skygebjerg, who's the Director of Workforce Management at Puzzel. Emma, thanks very much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks.
So obviously workforce management, I mean, we've been through a huge amount of sort of change in the contact center industry over the last sort of 12, 18 months. It'd be good to get a little bit around what your perspective's been in terms of what you've seen with your clients.
We've seen a lot of changes with the move to the cloud, a huge increase in cloud adoption. The reason for that adoption has been the pandemic. And we're still seeing a lot of companies struggling with the change and really moving agents to the home office or working partly in the office and partly from the home. We also see that a lot of legacy platforms don't support the kind of reporting you're looking for and that you need in terms of being able to report both agents in the office and working from home.
How ready would you say that the readiness level of the industry at large has been in terms of like adopting that remote working, sort of flexibles, remote working kind of patterns? I mean, how ready were we, and how ready do you think we are now?
Well, we weren't. I don't think we were that ready, really, but we were forced into being ready. It just forced a lot of companies to start thinking cloud. It's been more, that's something we'll do in the future. We were forced to adopt the cloud and also adopt the way that we accept people working from different places in a whole different way that we did before.
Remote working brings its own challenges in terms of remote management, and how do you think about that? And I suppose workforce management, can be a big part of that in terms of understanding, who you've got working when. I mean, what have been some of the challenges that you've sort of seen and sort of like really tried to come across in terms of like trying to work out working patterns, etc.
Right. So some of the challenges are, of course, around building schedules that fit this new way of working. Creating the flexibility that we need to accommodate for people that are in their house, and sometimes they have picking up kids or leaving kids or have homeschooling. So building availability that fits the agent, but also it's around visibility. So a lot around finding the right tools to really know where the agents are and if they're following the schedule that we have created. So those are some of the challenges that we definitely have seen.
Does remote working and having that flexibility, does it give you extra flexibility in schedules? I mean, have people been using that? So yes, you might need to go and pick up your kids, but that means that maybe you can work a little bit later in the evening, or you might get extra capacity in the evening, those kind of things. Does it give a much more sort of nuanced, flexible kind of workforce, do you think, or is it all not so positive?
No, it is actually, it is positive because we're able to build shifts, shorter shifts sometimes to cover specific peaks. When agents don't have to travel to work, they can work shorter shifts. We can also schedule them on split shifts to cover those peaks that we have. So it's definitely positive as well. In a way that we can really design shifts to fit also the peaks that we have in our traffic.
Do you think split shifts are going to become more common as a result of that with the remote workforce versus back in the office? And are we going to lose that when we come back into the office?
I think it will. I don't think we will lose it. I think it will continue to be there, but it is definitely bigger now and more common, just because of the fact that you can log on to the contact center platform, work for a few hours, then maybe do some work with your house or your kids, or do some hobbies, and then come back without affecting your life too much. But in the office, we've always seen split shifts being one of the some agents that prefer split shifts, but we haven't seen it like something that would be very, very common previously. So going back to the office, I think we will go back to the same kind of usage on split shifts that we've seen before.
And what are you hearing in terms of returning to the office? Is it going to be, everyone now back in? Are they already back? Are they all going to stay remote? There's some sort of blended. I mean, what would you say has been the prevailing thinking?
I think what we've heard and what we've seen is that a lot of companies will continue to offer a hybrid work style. So they will continue to have a portion of their workforce working from home, and often it is more flexibility around you might work in the office for a couple of days and then work the rest of the week from home. We mostly see those kind of setups where you have more work from the house, but you do both. And I haven't come across that many that require 100% in the office. But then again, we work with customers also that have very security sensitive information. And they would require 100% in the office, and they've always been in the office even during the pandemic, but maybe have a smaller portion of the workforce covering during that time. We have adopted this new way of working, and it's hard to go back and force everybody to go back to the office.
Yeah, so this blended way of working. And I do know in some sectors, I mean, it seems like a lot of people sort of like they want to be working remote on Friday or Monday, and it sort of gets squeezed into that sort of like middle of the week. It might be a little bit different in the contact center world, where you've got maybe even 7 days a week, right, where you sort of a bit more or retail. But certainly it seems like it's sort of concentrating. It feels like maybe just during the middle of the week a little bit.
Yeah, that's very common. At least if the agents can pick, it would be like that. Yeah.
So in terms of agent picking, it's a good point in terms of like, do you think that it's going to get more common if we have these flexible schedules to be able to make changes to schedules more often? I mean, particularly with some of the new workforce management tools that are out there, the ability to be able to mix and match and change your schedule much more dynamically seems to be, it's more capable. You're more capability to be able to do that. But is that something that you think is a trend that's going to continue?
Yeah, I think it's going to continue, and the more we focus on what's going on in real time, and the more we know about that, and the more we see, we will continue to do changes. Maybe not as much on the actual start time and end time, but on the content of the work, maybe moving breaks, moving the skill sets, moving what you're working on. So we'll see a lot around that. I think it will continue. But what we also see is of course around more around preferred working time. So already when we do create the schedule, being able to offer the agents the ability to communicate those preferred times. So having also the preferences, take those into account early on to set the start and end time, of course, mostly.
And do you think those short-term changes are driven by business need, or is it really just more around I suppose employee preference or employee satisfaction that's driving that change?
Yeah, those short-term changes I think are more around business needs and incoming traffic, and maybe short-term planning on meetings. Let's pull out this team to have a quick team meeting. Those kind of changes.
And I suppose the challenge for the workforce management team is going to be how do you do that and stay under control from a service level point of view, from a business point of view, like with all these changes coming through, because it becomes much more complex, I would think. The more changes you have.
Yeah. That is true. So it's important to have technology that supports the possibility to simulate before you make those changes, simulate how that affects the service level. Before we do pull all these people off on a meeting, or before we move these people to work on email, we need to know how that affects our service level. And also having the tool that supports the decision, not actually making this decision before you. So of course, I think the scheduler and the forecaster will stay the driver, as I like to say, and then the tools surrounding it, suggesting changes, should be supported by really good technology. AI is something that is coming in more and more. So having technology that supports us taking the right decisions, so that we can continue to deliver really good customer experience.
Yeah, and I suppose the AI, the machine learning piece. I mean, you've got the maths around schedules and switching shifts, etc. I mean that and there's that problem, right, which needs to be solved mathematically. But then I suppose you also have the forecasting of volumes as well, which can also change.
Right.
Is that what you're saying? The AI piece would come through, or?
Yeah, exactly. That's where that will come in place, and also around planning those meetings. When we plan those meetings based on what we're seeing in the traffic and the resources we have available right now. But of course, what we want to see on AI is we see this increased volume at the beginning of the day. How will the rest of the day look like? So. Solutions around that, and suggesting based on what we've seen so far, this is what we think the rest of the day look like, and this is what we suggest you, the changes we suggest you to make.
You're making me think of almost like the weather forecasting, right? It's almost like based on what we've seen in the first hour, here are 10 models of where we think it could be, and this one's the most likely sort of thing. Yeah.
Exactly, and looking at past weather days, how that has affected. Yeah.
So so if it's a sunny day, then we can have that meeting. If it's going to be a storm coming in, then maybe we don't. I don't know.
Exactly.
Yeah, and the world's got a lot more complex. I think even over the last year, it's got more complex in terms of digital. We talked about remote working, but also there's digital contact channels. A lot of people sort of like launch chat. Rather than voice. There's digital, self-service portals that are coming. From a planning point of view, does that add the complexity, and how do you think about that in terms of like planning around that? Because often we've got, even with remote agents, you've got the same person doing multiple things.
Exactly. So definitely having more channels makes it more complex. What we're seeing also is moving from one channel to another, which even brings another layer of complexity into this. So that definitely makes it more complex, but there are always, you have the history, you have the trends to look at, how things have evolved over time, and that can be used to predict also, even if we switched between different channels, what the future will look like. And bringing AI in, it will probably make things even more accurate going forward. So, but it does bring another complexity, and also thinking about digital channels. You usually have agents that can cover multiple channels at the same time, which is another complexity in forecasting. Because you need to address the fact that we have some agents that can cover 4 chats at the same time, others that can cover 3 chats, and if you would be covering an email and a chat at the same time. So those kind of complexities are things that we need to address in forecasting, to make sure that we have the right staff available to cover those interactions.
I suppose part of it is if you're not taking a call, then you might be able to do something else as well, and you can have that fill-in work. as well as then the more proactive kind of like you've got an inbound chat as well as a call. I would have thought.
Yeah, exactly. So there's different ways of looking at this. A lot of a lot of the contact centers are starting to look at all of this as an omni-channel environment, where you would be taking any kind of interaction that comes in based on the skill sets that you have. So whether that's an email or a chat or a phone call, you will be taking those as they come in. But we do still have a lot of customers that are on older platforms where they might have a special or a separate email platform, a separate chat platform, and a separate voice platform. And they often want to schedule people separately on emails and separately on chats, which really means that if you're on chats, then you cover only chats. You're not covering the voice at the moment, but overall we see the trend moving definitely towards the omni-channel way of working. So I think when more and more platforms support this way of working, we will see more around this taking whatever comes in.
And I suppose if you're planning it around interactions, and it's omni-channel interactions, then it really becomes a mix issue, I would think, because the variability of your interaction length might be quite a lot different if it's chat only versus if it's voice only, just to pick two extremes, and then everything in between. And I suppose it's how do you start thinking about what the right mix is going to be and capacity planning around the right mix? Because if you get it wrong, then the person's on a call and can't take the next chat.
Exactly. So that has to be taken into account, and that's done usually. So we do it in our system. We do it during the simulation. So we're simulating that Emma is taking this call and Patrick is taking that email and so forth. And based on the simulation, we can calculate exactly the number of people needed for all channels, independent of media. But it's all based on the skill sets, and of course it's something that needs to be set is of course also the skill sets themselves, and maybe looking at performance over time, because we might have some agents that are super agents, and we might have somebody that needs a bit more training to be a full-time employee in that sense.
So in terms of like the call centers and the future call centers, I mean, what do you sort of think is going to happen in the future? So we've got to where we are now in terms of digital. We've got omni-channel that's coming up. We've got, I suppose, software as a service and sort of like cloud-based technologies. I mean, where do we go from here? I mean, and what's going to be the impact on contact centers, and what do you think they're going to look like in 5-10 years' time?
Well, I think we will continue the cloud journey, and we're not at our goal yet, and there's still a lot of the technology out there is still on-premise based or maybe hybrid solutions. So we will continue that journey, and also we'll see a lot more around usability. I think that still has a lot to learn in terms of how do we create really user-friendly solutions that we can really get the most out of. I do think we'll see more around flexibility as well, being able to, on a forecasting or on a workforce management perspective, flexibility, of course, around the agents and in the tool itself. And of course, in the contact center solutions as well, having the flexibility that allows you to address the specific business needs of each. I think that will be key going forward. And then I think there's a lot that will happen also on the AI front. We've just seen the beginning, and we'll see a lot more around that. And then I do think the human aspect as well, more focus around how do we keep our agents with us longer. So how do we create a working environment that really keeps them with us? And I think In the past, it's been more, okay, how do we do the most? How do we cover our service levels, and how do we deliver as cost efficient service as possible? But it's moved more into how do we engage our agents, and how do we make them as happy as they need to be in order to deliver that great customer experience. So a lot more around the agent side of things, both in terms of supporting with technology, but also building that working environment for them.
I mean, flexibility seems key from an employee point of view. So there's been quite a bit of discussion around, I suppose, shortages in the labour market, and people trying to hire quickly, and the sort of like it's been quite challenging environment, I think, for a lot of call centres recently. I mean, do you think the flexibility becomes a bit of a competitive advantage for staff retention?
I definitely think it will. So it does, and we already see that already now that companies that can provide more flexibility, better work environment, maybe for some agents that want to work from their home a few days a week, maybe want to more design the way that they do want to work, what hours they want to work. So companies that really want to address that, I think they're in a very competitive position. So that will be, I think that's because we see a lot of, this year has been a lot of retention in general in the market, not only in contact centers, but overall. And companies need to find a good way to promote themselves, and working on the working environment, and anything we can do for the agents to build around their like a work-life balance, or building schedules that fit their work or their life. That will be key in finding those good agents, and also preventing attrition going forward.
I suppose the challenge for businesses is, how do you do that, but then stay in control and then deliver the customer service, right? And it's kind of like that's the balance, is kind of the challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, definitely. So I think it needs to come with, of course, communication. We need to allow the agents to be able to communicate those preferences, but we need also to communicate back that we'll try to address as much as possible of that, but we still need to fulfill our business goals. So really communicating so they understand why schedules need to be in a certain way. So that's definitely key.
We touched on earlier a little bit around motivation, I suppose, or morale, maybe is a better way of saying it, in terms of like people working remotely. And again, so do you think that's going to be another forcing factor for in office work? And are there other tools that you've seen used sort of remotely to try and just get people more involved, have that feeling of being in the office when you've got remote work?
There's a lot of tools out there, gamification tools that can help in the process, even for remote working. I think from a workforce management perspective, it's around the real-time monitoring. So, and also knowing or communicating again with the agents why we're monitoring real time, and it's for the best of them. So providing if we have agents that are not following their schedule, it's going to affect all the others. So really understanding why we're doing that. I think that's also key, and then finding ways to communicate how when they do things that are good, they see agents that are part of this gamification have provided really good customer experience, for example, have very good NPS scores, or perform well in adherence and in occupancy and other things, and communicating that will be also part of So really working with a multitude of different tools but I think communication is key. And where we're often lacking is communicating what's the strategy from the business.
Yeah.
So for them also to feel that they're part of the journey going forward, and understand the importance of customer experience, and the work that they do. I think that's really really important.
It does sound like there's more changes on the way. And just before this call, we were chatting a bit about video calls.
Right.
Video calls is yet another channel that seems to be sort of like bubbling in the background. And throwing that into the mix as well. So you might have telephone calls and video calls and chat, and you might have it all at the same time as well.
We do see video as a very strong channel growing, and we recently invested in a company that specializes in video and live share. And there's a lot of usage areas for this. A lot of calls, for example, for support that will be made much easier. You mentioned also banking, where we do see a lot of usage within the banking industry, within healthcare as well. But it also puts it is a different kind of channel for the agent. And of course, the agents have to be prepared to take that video call as well.
Yeah.
So,
well, Emma, thanks very much for making the time and chatting with me about it. I mean, there's been some unique challenges, I think, from a workforce management point of view and sort of a planning point of view over the last year. It sounds like there's more change on the way, and it's almost like going to accelerate a little bit. So still more to go, but I think it's been quite exciting actually in terms of what we've seen and where we can go. So it's fascinating. Thanks very much for giving us the insight.
Well, thank you so much for having me.